Good morning, students. I feel you are all happy there. You are all following the corona rules of having a mask all around when you go out, not going out unnecessarily. Keeping you, the elderly in your house, and the people with comorbidities like diabetes, you can easily catch the disease if you bring it out from outside. So do this and be careful and be happy. Stay in the house only. Along with the classes which are going on, we are doing genitourinary malignancies. We have finished renal malignancies and bladder malignancies, in between ureteric malignancy and all. Today, we'll be talking about carcinoma of the prostate. As you know, prostate is a very vital organ situated at the level of the bladder neck, the prostate. So if it is diseased, there could be outflow obstruction problems. And this cancer prostate is so prevalent, very common, that you cannot diagnose it unless you think about that. All problems in the elderly are thought to be due to benign hypertrophy of the prostate. It's not so. Outflow symptoms, which are called lower urinary tract symptoms, LUTS, these can be produced by benign hypertrophy of the prostate, carcinoma of the prostate, and even stricture of the prostate. So you have to be very careful, should not assume that these LUTs are due to benign hypertrophy of the prostate only. Sometimes neurogenic problems also produce certain symptomatology of lower urinary tract symptoms. So all these things you have to rule out before you diagnose a condition. Carcinoma of prostate is one of those things which you have to think about to diagnose. So the carcinoma of prostate, you are rightly pointed out that is the most common malignancy in the genitourinary malignancy. Last time when I asked the question, I was happy because most of you have answered that the prostate cancer is the most common non-cutaneous cancer. The incidence increases with the age, and it is said about 80% of the 80-year-old people will have some focus of carcinoma of prostate in their prostate. This has been proved previously by autopsy studies, which were done in case of normal death also in certain other cases. So the natural history of the prostate cancer is also varying. In some patients, may manifest, progress galloping fastly, and then cause mortality. And some people live with cancer prostate and they die because of some other reason, but not due to cancer prostate. So such is the variability of the natural history of the prostate and such incidence in the prostate cancer. Racial preponderance was noticed in American studies, wherein blacks were affected more. One important thing in prostate cancer is that positive family history. If there is a positive family history of the carcinoma of prostate, that increases the relative risk for the cancer prostate in the others. So you have to keep in mind that the prostate is the most common cancer for the genitourinary tract. Incidence increases with the age. The presentation will be in the elderly only also. And there is a broad spectrum of biological activity from being quiescent to very rapidly progressing cancer prostate. And positive family history of cancer prostate is important because that increases the risk to others. Significant and certain things are identified in the incidence and epidemiology of cancer. It was supposed to be lower in parts of the world consuming low fat and plant-based diet, most of lycopene and selenium. Lycopene is very common in tomatoes. It is a common ingredient in tomatoes. So if you eat more tomatoes, that may prevent the cancer prostate. That's one of the things. And this lycopene has also been promoted as anti-cancer prostate in the drug form also. So the natural diet is tomatoes. Drug form is also there. So low-fat diet, plant-based diet, including lycopene and selenium, is supposed to protect from cancer prostate. Likewise, omega-3 fatty acids and vitamin E are supposed to have protective effect against cancer prostate. Vitamin D and calcium may increase the risk. That's one observation. And previous vasectomy has been suggested as a factor that was going against the family planning methods at that time. And some studies have shown that the previous history of vasectomy is suggested. But that's not right because it has not substantiated. Most of the people including people with cancer prostate might have undergone vasectomy. So it doesn't mean vasectomy increases risk. So that has not been substantiated. So what, as I said, there is a wide variation in the presentation of cancer prostate. Usually it presents with LUTS, lower urinary tract symptoms, similar to benign hypertrophic prostate, like frequency, dysuria, narrowing of stream, and sensation of incomplete emptying, things like that. And here in cancer prostate, pelvic pain and hematuria are the added symptoms. As I said, in the cancer bladder class, benign hypertrophic prostate also has hematuria. That is called decoy prostate because it will be hiding the cancer blood inside. Whereas in carcinoma prostate, because there is ulceration, hematuria may be the present symptom. And pelvic pain, because it's situated in the pelvis and closely related to the structures in the pelvis, pelvic pain may be one of the important presenting symptoms. Obstructive or irritating symptoms, similar to benign hypertrophic prostate, like frequency, dysuria, nocturnal frequency of urination, urgency, hesitancy, precipitancy, post-void dribbling, all these things are similar to benign hypertrophic prostate. That's why most of the doctors also assume it is due to benign hypertrophic prostate. Unless you have this carcinoma prostate in mind, you will not be able to diagnose these things. Apart from these symptoms similar to benign hypertrophy, lower urinary tract symptoms, these people may have bone pain, malaise, anemia, or pancytopenia because of the involvement of the bone marrow, and renal failure because it produces chronic obstruction, bilateral hydronephrosis, and renal failure. They may present in a silent way, which is asymptomatic. The presentation may be with renal failure because chronic bladder distension does not produce severe pain and doesn't cause patient to seek attention. Incidental discovery of locally advanced disease of systemic metastasis during the investigation for other symptoms. This is one of the manifestations of cancer prostate. I recall one 30-year-old male had a painful lesion over the right tibia. In that age, you don't think of malignancy, but so many things were considered, X-rays were done, and ultimately it was proved to be a secondary to carcinoma of the prostate, which is very unusual in that age group, very unusual presentation, but still it was proved to be cancer of prostate. So you'll have to keep in view that advanced disease may be present before they manifest. And what is the pathology of the carcinoma of the prostate? Prostate is gland containing glandular tissues. So more than 95% of the prostate cancers are adenocarcinomas. They are adenocarcinomas. And if you know the anatomy of the prostate is divided anatomically into two lateral lobes, posterior lobe, median lobe, and apical lobe. But now, after the advent of transrectal ultrasound, it has been classified into central zone, transition zone, and peripheral zone. So this cancer prostate occurs mainly in the peripheral zone. 60 to 70% of the cases occur in peripheral zone, and 10 to 20% originate in the transition zone, and 5 to 10% in the central zone. Benign hypertrophic prostate mostly occurs in the central zone, periurethral zone, whereas cancer prostate occurs in the posterior zone. So one question that is, patient has undergone prostatectomy, either open prostatectomy or transurethral resection. Will he still have cancer prostate? That's the question. Patient still can have cancer prostate because in these prostatectomies, we don't remove the prostate en bloc, in toto. We leave the posterior lobes by open operations, and also this posterior zone and all these things are left behind. We only create a channel for the patient to pass urine by removing the lateral lobes, not the posterior lobe. We remove the medial lobe if it is there and lateral lobes, not the posterior lobe. So cancer prostate can still occur even after the operation of prostatectomy, either open or transurethral resection of the prostate. So you should remember this. When a patient comes with symptoms, recurrence of symptoms after prostate operation, you have to suspect that it could be a cancer prostate. That's why all the tissue which is removed in transurethral resection or open prostate are sent for histopathological examination Even though you don't clinically suspect cancer prostate, you have the evidence of cancer prostate in the resected specimen or the prostate. Then the treatment varies based on that. So all these things should be studied by histopathology to rule out malignancy. So prostate cancer is frequently multifocal. That's why sometimes, even though you do biopsies preoperatively also, you can miss a focus of cancer prostate. So they are multifocal, and we may not be in this specimen we have studied. So you should need to have high index of suspicion and try to localize the prostate nodule and take a biopsy from there to prove it. And chromosomal rearrangements or number of abnormalities are described in cancer prostate, but they are not used for diagnosis of the cancer. These exhibit heterogeneity within the tissue. As I said, in certain areas it can be normal, in certain areas it can show some malignancy. So you have to be very cautious in studying these slides and taking the biopsies. And for any scientific study, you need to have a standard to compare the lesions. So one such thing is a grading of the cancer prostate. It is more for the postgraduates and others, but not for undergraduates. Carcinoma prostate is graded as per the Gleason system. It's called Gleason's grade and Gleason's score, two things. Based on the low power appearance of the glandular architecture under the microscope. The grading starts from well differentiated to undifferentiated, grade 1 to 5. So these are grades, Gleason's grade. Gleason's score is, in two areas it is studied about the differentiation and they are added on. So Gleason's score also is important in the cancer prostate comparison. So these depend to well, moderately and poorly differentiated tumors, right? So cancer prostate is there. How does it spread locally? As you know, prostate is situated at the level of the bladder neck. Seminal vesicles and bladder neck and trigone are intimately related to that. There is a distal sphincter and both the ureters are in the bladder itself, opening in the bladder, and the prostate enlargement may affect this prostates. And rectum, which is separated to prostate by dermal fascia, also may become involved. This is how the carcinoma prostate spreads locally, apart from distant spreads. It also spreads by bloodstream to different areas. Most common site of origin is skeletal metastasis. That's why they usually complain of pelvic pain due to metastasis in the pelvic bones, or may have a pathological fracture due to a secondary in a long bone. That's also one of the presentations in elderly age group. If they sustain a pathological fracture, we'll have to rule out cancer prostate in a male. Pelvic bones in the lower lumbar vertebrae are also frequently involved. So sometimes they may have paraplegia because of this. Paraplegia as an acute manifestation can be presented in carcinoma prostate. The femoral head, rib cage, and skull are the other areas wherein the blood spread occurs. Then the lymphatic spread. Lymphatic spread is important when we are planning to do a surgery for that radical prostatectomy for this thing. This spreads via lymphatics passing to the lymph nodes besides the internal iliac vein, via lymphatics which pass over the seminal vesicles to external iliac lymph nodes, and retroperitoneal lymph nodes, mediastinal lymph nodes, and supraclavicular lymph nodes. So these are all the stages through which the carcinoma prostate spreads to lymphatics. So any disease, you need to have a staging so that you can compare the results of your treatment with these different stages. So cancer prostate is also staged. T1A and 1B found incidentally during TRP. You don't diagnose clinically before operation, but when I sent this tissue for histopathology, foci of carcinoma prostate are present there. This is T1A and 1B. T1C is identified by elevated PSA. PSA is prostate specific antigen. We'll come to it later. But if you do PSA and is elevated, that is significantly elevated, it may point out a prostate cancer. That is T1C. T2 is prostate growth confined within the prostate lobe, one lobe within the prostate. Once again, 2A is the only one lobe. T2B is involving both lobes. Then T3 extends through prostate capsule to outside. T4 invades adjacent structures like bladder neck, rectum, and pelvic wall. This is the staging based on the local spread of the cancer. Then the lymph nodes. Regional lymph nodes for the prostate are obturator, internal iliac, external iliac, presacral lymph nodes, and also up to the supraclavicular lymph nodes. Stage NX is they cannot be assessed. N0, no regional lymph node metastasis. N1, metastasis in regional lymph node or nodes, multiple nodes. This is staging based on the regional lymph nodes. Then metastasis. M is metastasis. MX, metastasis cannot be assessed. M0, no distant metastasis. M1A, distant metastasis in non-regional lymph nodes, that is spreading beyond the regional lymph nodes. 1B, distant metastasis to bone, and 1C, distant metastasis to other sites other than bone. So this is TNM staging for cancer prostate. You see here, both lobes are in the 1A. 2A is only one lobe involved, 2B both are involved. 3, just prostate capsule outside, invading the adjacent areas. So rectal examination is the single most important thing. And all of you should be ready to do a rectal examination every male patient who presents with you beyond 50 years with some urinary symptoms. This, if it is made a dictum, you'll be diagnosing more and more cancer prostates. To diagnose cancer prostate, 4 things are done now. One is serum PSA, which we'll come to later. Then digital rectal examination and transrectal ultrasound of the prostate, with or without biopsy. So that's how cancer prostate is diagnosed. Of course, as per the benign hypertrophic prostate, we have urinary flow studies and other studies, but rectal examination is single most important thing. Digital rectal examination, the abbreviation is DRE, is very important. Whenever you see a patient, I want to make a rectal examination, you will examine in lithotomy position, make him in lithotomy position and examine. And then you examine the perianal sensation. Perianal sensation is important because absence of perianal sensation and cremasteric reflex is a suggestive of a neurological damage to the bladder nerve supply. So this can cause retention of urine and other urinary symptoms of frequency dysuria and other things. Then you try to spread the walls of the anal canal and see the tone of the anal sphincter. The tone is not there, it is separated easily and it admits 2 or 3 fingers easily. Normally, one finger you want to examine, it encounters some resistance, normal sphincteric resistance. And if you put the finger and ask the patient to cough, there's a squeezing sensation of the finger. That is a normal sphincter. So you examine the perianal sensation, you elicit cremasteric reflex, and you see for the anal tone. Then you palpate the prostate and other rectal mucosa. Prostate is palpated in the rectum. The patient in lithotomy position, prostate is felt as the consistency of the tip of the nose. Normal prostate is a consistency of the tip of the nose, it's a firm in consistency. There are 2 lateral lobes which are easily palpable with the median sulcus, and upper border of the prostate you can easily reach. The normal weight of the prostate is around 25 grams. So that is the size grade 1, wherein you feel both the lateral lobes with median sulcus and upper border is easily reached. Ultimately, when you palpate the lateral lobe, it is, as I said, firm as the tip of the nose. So you find a nodule that is abnormal. A nodule, if it is found, you have to see whether the nodule is single or multiple. What is the consistency of the nodule? Whether the mucosa is easily palpable or the moves over the nodule. All the things are important. If there is malignancy, it is hard in consistency. Mucosa is not freely mobile over the nodule. So you can detect nodules within the prostate by rectal examination. So you have to make a rectal examination as a routine in all the patients, whether you do PSA or not. If you do digital rectal examination, you find more and more cancers. So detect nodules within the prostate, and this can be combined with needle core biopsy, which is called true cut needle biopsy. And transrectal ultrasound may be used to assess the local stage. Transrectal ultrasound delineates all these three zones of the prostate: ultrasound zones, central zone, transitional zone, and the peripheral zone, wherein you find the nodules. Depending on the echogenicity of the nodule, you find malignancy, which is easily identifiable, and you can take a biopsy directly from that nodule. It is stony hard induration seen in cancer of prostate. Obliteration of the median sulcus suggests cancer of the prostate. So this is how you take a true cut biopsy. Putting your finger into the rectum, you try to palpate the prostate, and then guide the true cut needle into the nodule and take a biopsy. These are the investigations for cancer prostate. General blood tests are done, and there is leukoerythroblastic anemia secondary to extensive bone marrow invasion. These are all features of advanced malignancy, not in very early malignancy. Anemia secondary to renal failure, and renal failure, elevated renal parameters due to obstructive uropathy. Thrombocytopenia and evidence of disseminated intravascular coagulation with increased fibrinogen degradation products in cancer prostate in the late stage. Liver function tests are done, raised serum acid phosphatase, prostatic fraction, and raised serum alkaline phosphatase. These two things we were doing when we were training. Prostate-specific antigen was not available. So for every cancer prostate suspicious case, we used to do serum acid phosphatase and alkaline phosphatase. Elevation of serum acid phosphatase is supposed to suggest prostate malignancy. The prostatic fraction of the serum acid phosphatase can be determined. If it is elevated, it is suggestive of cancer prostate. Serum alkaline phosphatase elevation occurs due to secondaries in the bone and hepatic involvement. So elevated serum alkaline phosphatase is suggestive of bony secondaries, and elevated serum acid phosphatase prostatic fraction is suggestive of cancer prostate. But now this is replaced by prostate-specific antigen, distinguished by measurement of isoenzymes or gamma glutamyl transferase, all these enzymes, liver enzymes. So now we come to prostate-specific antigen. It's an important short note for you in the final examination. What is prostate-specific antigen? It is a glycoprotein produced by both cancerous and non-cancerous tissue in the prostate. So normally also prostate-specific antigen is present in the blood. It is mostly found in semen, which is also produced by the prostate. As you know, the prostate secretions form a major part of the ejaculate. So 70% of ejaculate is from prostate secretions. And small amounts of PSA ordinarily circulate in the blood. These are measured in terms of nanograms. High levels of PSA that may indicate the presence of prostate cancer, they usually indicate the prostate cancer. But many of the non-malignant causes of prostate also can produce elevation of prostate-specific antigen, like enlarged prostate, BPH, and prostatitis, inflamed prostate, can also increase PSA levels. As also, rectal examination is supposed to elevate the prostate-specific antigen, so you should not do immediately, you have to wait some time. So this is done as a screening procedure in the West for a long period. You do prostate-specific antigen for everybody. So this creates a lot of unnecessary operations. So some people decry its use as a screening agent, but if you suspect cancer prostate by rectal examination and other things, you have to confirm it by doing a prostate-specific antigen, which is grossly elevated, and you can titrate your treatment also following the prostate-specific antigen. And also, after the end of the treatment, any recurrence of the prostate cancer also can be seen by elevated prostate-specific antigen. So it is very useful. Prostate-specific antigen is useful, one, as a diagnostic element, two, to study the efficacy of the treatment, three, to know the recurrences. So it's the only one tool used to screen for early signs of prostate cancer, as I said. In patients already been diagnosed with prostate cancer, PSA test may be used to judge the effectiveness of the treatment and checking for recurrence of the cancer. Another common screening test usually done in relation to PSA test is a digital rectal examination. As I said, we depend on digital rectal examination, PSA, transurethral ultrasound, and biopsy for diagnosis of cancer prostate. So, as I said, it's a glycoprotein. What is its function in seminal secretion is it is liquefies semen. So, liquefies semen is an important part of the prostate-specific antigen. It's a marker for prostate disease, replacing acid phosphatase, as I said before. The normal upper limit is 0 to 4 nanograms. Upper limit is 4 nanograms. But it doesn't mean if it is 5 nanograms, it doesn't mean it is malignancy. There is a gray area. And if it is 100, it is definitely malignancy. If it is more than 20, definitely you have to think about malignancy and try to prove it. If it is only 5 or 6 or less than 10, it may be due to, as I said, benign hypertrophy prostate or some inflammation in the prostate or your rectal examination also. So metastatic prostate cancers, the value is more than 30 nanograms. And locally confined prostate cancer, less than 50 nanograms. But we may have still higher values in Indian patients. PSA in the region of 4 to 12 nanograms in both early prostate and BPH. So this is not very that definite. So this is about the PSA. PSA is a screening tool which is done in the West as a routine for age. But in our parts, we have done also that. But it causes more unnecessary operations and treatment in cancer prostate if you just elevate borderline elevation. Unless there is a nodule and a biopsy positive, if you treat only elevated PSA, there will be more number of cancer prostate patients. The normal is a glycoprotein. Normal values between 0 to 4 nanograms. PSA can be used to diagnose cancer prostate, to follow the efficacy of your treatment, and 3, to check for recurrence of the cancer prostate, which can also occur even after operations for prostate. So a patient presents with symptoms after operation for prostate. You on rectal examination, you find some irregularity in the prostate area, nodules. Then PSA, elevated PSA definitely says it is cancer prostate. So that's how PSA is utilized. Then after diagnosing cancer prostate, you have to assess the patient as a whole for spread of the disease. X-ray of the chest shows metastasis in lung or ribs. CT scan also is used to do that, and abdominal X-ray to study the bony secondaries. Characteristic sclerotic metastasis in lumbar vertebrae and pelvic bones. This causes sclerotic metastasis, bone sclerosis. It causes secondaries cause sclerotic metastasis. Bone appears to be dense and coarse. Osteolytic metastases are very uncommon. Sorry for the spelling mistake. Then transrectal ultrasound and MRI. This is how an X-ray shows. Is suggests pelvic bone metastasis showing arsinoid prostate with multiple sclerotic areas. Then bone scan. Bone scanning is a part of staging procedure, not a diagnostic procedure. Performed, the PSA is more than 10 nanograms per ml. Only if the diagnosis is certain by biopsy. In less than 10 nanomol, bone scan only on clinical indications, not routine. As I said, it's not a routine investigation. Bone scan is not a routine investigation. It's only used to study the spread of the disease after the diagnosis is established. It is more sensitive than an X-ray. Definitely, an X-ray is not as sensitive as bone scan. So if you suspect bone deposits, you have to do a bone scan, not just an X-ray. There can be some false positives also, wherein some inflammatory actions also can produce these scanning positive things. Lymphangiogram is not done nowadays. Laparoscopic pelvic albumoplasty before more accurate when you are doing, and lymphangiogram is not done nowadays. Bone marrow, it is gross spread disease carcinoma prostate. Bone marrow also can show metastatic carcinoma and also bone marrow depression. So this is how a bone scan shows. Not very clear here, but these are all the spots wherein there is increased activity, which show. So these are all increased activity, which are signs of bone deposits. So you have diagnosed cancer prostate, you have staged it, you have investigated it, you have found certain features. So how do you treat? One important thing in cancer prostate is it has been studied from active treatment to active surveillance. So as I said, most of these patients may die of cancer, may die due to with the cancer prostate, but not die of cancer prostate. So many people, if they don't have symptoms, are just followed. Active surveillance is done for most of the patients, and they are symptomatic, presenting with urinary symptoms or some other symptoms, they are treated. The treatment depends on stage, age, and life expectancy of the patient. This life expectancy of the patient is very important because the life expectancy due to comorbid conditions is not much. No drastic radical treatments for these patients. Simple management and palliative measures are given for these patients. And the performance status of the patient also is very important. And of course, ultimately, it is patient's preference. Nowadays, the treatment is like what is available in your restaurant. You tell the patient, these are things available, what you want. So that's how it is done. And the pathological stage is predicted by PSA, digital examination, biopsy, Gleason's grade. And cancer prostate is broadly classified as localized cancer and advanced disease. So localized cancer, if patient's life expectancy is more, his performance level is good, okay, still active, around 60 years of age, then you do a radical prostatectomy and radiotherapy if it is required, and active monitoring of the patient for recurrence and manage recurrences. In advanced disease is only a palliative treatment by hormone ablation being first line of therapy. So incidentally diagnosed cancer prostate usually is low volume and well differentiated. It is managed by active surveillance. So if you diagnose on histopathology certain areas of cancer prostate, you don't need to do immediately radical prostatectomy. You follow him by active surveillance, every 3 to 6 monthly digital examination and serial PSA measurements. And also PSA, serum PSA value, there is one term, PSA velocity, how fast it increases, that's also important. And that is also taken into consideration by taking a decision about treatment. Treated if there is evidence of disease progression, then only they are treated. And managed conservatively if he is more than 70 years, because life expectancy is not more. Radical prostatectomy if less than 70, even less than 60 years of age, with a lot of productive years ahead and longevity is expected. As I said, if she is less than 70 and productive, is able to work normally, then you do radical prostatectomy. That means removal of the entire prostate and adjacent lymph nodes, and doing a uretrovesical anastomosis, vesical anastomosis, or a radiotherapy, radical radiotherapy by external therapy or by implants. Elderly with low-grade disease, only active monitoring. You don't treat them. If they have retention of urine, you treat for locally by transurethral resection of the prostate by creating a channel. That's called channel TURP, wherein patient can pass urine without a catheter. And if they have bone metastasis, treat the metastasis, but no radical surgery. Hormonal manipulation is given for these patients. Elderly bladder outlet obstruction, as I said, TURP. They are given TURP to create a channel for them to pass urine with or without hormonal therapy. I usually combine with hormone therapy for these patients with obstruction. Radical treatment is beneficial to prevent progression to metastatic disease in younger age group. Once again, is a repetition. Locally advanced, significant risk of disease progression. Close follow-up is not possible. Early androgen ablation, if it is required, local advanced disease. Sexually active, conservative with androgen ablation with symptomatic treatment. Younger men, androgen ablation with radiotherapy is the treatment of choice. Metastatic disease has very poor outcome in cancer prostate. Symptomatic androgen ablation produces pain relief in about 2/3. Asymptomatic prostate, as I said, mostly active surveillance. Younger patients, fitter patients, systemic chemotherapy with docetaxel and given. this is about cancer prostate. So what you have to find about cancer prostate is, cancer prostate is most common thing in the urogenital cancer. You have to suspect to diagnose bladder cancer. Then only you can treat. It is diagnosed by digital rectal examination and prostate specific antigen and other things. This is about cancer prostate. We have time, so we'll discuss about benign hypertrophic prostate also today. Taking into the thing, benign hypertrophic prostate is a very common disease. And does benign hypertrophy progress to cancer? That's another thing. There's another thing to be true. Benign hypertrophic prostate does not become malignancy. Malignant focus can be there even beginning, and manifest after the prostate surgery. But a benign hypertrophic prostate will not become a malignancy. You have to remember that. But a patient can have prostate even after prostatectomy. So that's how this thing concept finishes. Then we come to benign hypertrophic prostate. As I said, benign hypertrophy occurs in almost everybody. Prostate normal size is 25 grams. And as the age advances, the prostate size increases. So this doesn't mean everybody will be symptomatic and request treatment. Regarding, I forgot to tell you, what is androgen ablation? What are you going to do? These things. Archidectomy is the simplest thing. Archidectomy is the simplest thing of androgen deprivation. You do archidectomy, patient's PSA will come down. Then after a while it raises because there are other sources of testosterone in the body like adrenaline. So for that, you'll give drugs like bicalutamide which prevent the further testosterone conversion to dihydrotestosterone and active ingredient. So these things are done. That is bicalutamide and other groups are done to suppress PSA or more. Suppose patient doesn't want to have archidectomy, you will give LHRH antagonists, which once again prevent the testosterone from becoming dihydrotestosterone. So medical ablation and surgical ablation. Medical ablation is surgical ablation produces predictable results. Medical ablation, if they don't, this is a prolonged treatment, and patient may not be taking these injections, LHRH antagonists, for at least once in 3 months it has to be taken. Previously, we used to give stilbestrol for all these patients, which was with symptoms, side effects like gynecomastia, breast enlargement and other things. And the dose also was controversial. We used to give 3 milligrams of stilbestrol per day. Later on, stilbestrol was discontinued and the newer drugs have come into place. Bicalutamide, that is one drug which is given, anti-androgen. After we used total androgen blockade is another thing. You have to totally block. You have to do archidectomy and bicalutamide. So what do you give? After archidectomy, you see the fall of PSA. And if the PSA doesn't fall, you add this bicalutamide. And these are given as cycles. For 90 days you give, repeat the PSA, which is showing suppression, not elevation. You can wait and then do it again after 3 months. It is still increased. Then you can start this. There's another cancer of this hormone resistant cancer. You do anti-androgen ablation and other things, still prostate cancer goes on increasing. So what to do with those things? These are given palliative chemotherapy and other things. But hormone resistant cancer is a very serious problem in cancer prostate, very difficult to treat. So summarizing the hormonal management, which we normally do, is only orchidectomy for patients who accept it, or LHRH, suppress the testosterone conversion to dihydrotestosterone. So these are the drugs used in hormonal manipulation. One is surgery, radical prostatectomy. Two is radiotherapy by direct or by implantation of the needles into the prostate tissue itself. That's called brachytherapy. And three, hormonal manipulation by means of orchidectomy or injectables, medical orchidectomy. These are the treatment available for palliative measures. And hormone-resistant and metastatic disease, metastasis you irradiate so that pain comes down and other things. Spine, emergency paraparesis in the spine, you give steroids and radiation so that they recover. So those are the advanced treatments for individual specific problems. So you have to remember this: surgery, radiotherapy, and hormonal manipulation. Hormonal manipulation by prevention of conversion to dihydrotestosterone, and androgen ablation is by means of orchidectomy and bicalutamide group of drugs for total androgen blockade. And cancer, hormone resistant malignancy is very difficult to treat, and chemotherapy and other palliative things. Most of the things depend on the age. If the patient is aged, elderly, you don't do anything. If you develop retention of urine, do a TURP and give androgen ablation therapy if you're already not received, or just give it relief of obstruction. Right? That's regarding cancer prostate. Regarding BPH, as you know, I was already talking to you about this lobes of the prostate: anterior lobe, two lateral lobes, posterior lobe, and apical lobe. And this ultrasound zones by McNeil: peripheral zone, central zone, and transitional zone. Peripheral zone mainly posterior lobe, most common carcinomas occur here. Central zone posterior to urethral lumen above the ejaculator ducts, and transitional zone in between BPH occurs here. We were already discussing that. So this is the prostate with various lobes. Yes, you see, these are all the transitional zone, and this is the central zone, and this is the peripheral zone, wherein the ultrasound divisions: two lateral lobes, middle lobe, posterior lobe, and two lateral lobes, one middle lobe, and posterior lobe is anatomical division. Another certain things to remember, anatomical things: fascia of renal area separates prostate from the rectum. The neurovascular bundles supplying the corpora penis are in the very close relation to the prostate capsule, a fact to be remembered in radical prostatectomy of done for cancer prostate, wherein if you preserve these things, erection will be normal, otherwise there will not be any erection. These are the risk of damage during radical prostatectomy. You had to remember this nerve supply. Inadvertent diathermy in the region of these nerves may be erectile problem after transrectal prostatectomy also. So this is a picture of prostate and associated things. Prostate, as I've been discussing, as a sexual function, this is an important thing in the secretion of the prostate. Secretions are an important part of the ejaculate. Majority is secreted by Leydig cells of the testis. Testosterone is converted to dihydrotestosterone by 5-alpha reductase. This is found in high concentration in the prostate. These are certain things in physiology you have to remember. This already we have discussed about the prostate-specific antigen in cancer prostate, which is a glycoprotein, facilitates liquefaction. It's a marker for prostate cancer. Can be also, elevation can be seen in benign diseases also. So benign hypertrophy occurs in men more than 50 years. Common causes significant lower urinary tract symptoms. These are abbreviated as LUTS. Most common cause of bladder outflow obstruction in the men beyond 70 years. At advanced age, serum testosterone level falls. Estrogenic steroids fall slowly compared to testosterone. There is prostate enlargement due to estrogenic effect. So that is the pathogenesis. Pathology: there is hyperplasia of glandular epithelium and connective tissue. This affects submucous glands in the transit zone. There is nodular enlargement, compression of the prostate adjacent glands. There is a false capsule causes, and typical lateral lobe appearance. This is What is the consequences of this outflow obstruction due to prostate cancer or whatever it is? Sometimes there are no symptoms. There is no bladder obstruction. There is no symptoms. But next stage is no symptoms, but urodynamic evidence of bladder outlet obstruction are there by means of low urinary flow. Normally, you pass around 15 ml of urine per second. So in here, prostate hypertrophy, lateral compression, urinary flow becomes reduced. So that's one of the manifestations of early symptoms. Lower tract symptoms can develop after significant enlargement. So evidence of obstruction may not be there, but still symptoms are there. Acute retention of urine, chronic retention, hematuria, urinary tract infection, and stone formation as other manifestations of benign hypertrophy. When the prostate enlarges, what are the effects it produces? In the urethra, there is lengthening of the prostate urethra, but no narrowing. Normal posterior curve is exaggerated. Distortion of prostate urethra when only one lobe is enlarged. On the bladder, it causes hypertrophy of the musculature, trabeculated appearance of the bladder, and increased vascularity, and enlarged veins at the base causing hematuria, but this can be only a decoy prostate. So you see here what the prostate enlargement produces effects over the bladder. It's hypertrophy. This is hypertrophy of the musculature. Sometimes it forms a diverticulum-like thing. And trabeculate, these are all trabeculations, heavily trabeculated bladder, indicative of obstruction to outflow here. Bladder tries to compensate for the obstruction by hypertrophy. Becomes more powerful, tries to become more powerful to take care of the obstruction. So as long as there is compensation by hypertrophy, there is no retention, only frequency and urgency as symptoms are there due to hyperirritability of the bladder musculature. Once it fails, there is a stage of decompensation, retention, and other things follow. So this produces lower urinary tract symptoms, LUTS, very common in both sexes. Previously, we used to compare all this, put it in the word prostatism, but now the name given is LUTS, lower urinary tract symptoms. It is possibly due to impairment of smooth muscle function and neurovascular coordination. Causes are idiopathic Letrozar activity, overactivity, neuropathic bladder dysfunction, degeneration of bladder smooth muscle, and bladder outlet obstruction due to BPH. As I said, bladder outlet obstruction is a broad term consisting of the sphincteric area, dysfunctional sphincteric area, dysfunction of the bladder musculature and neurogenic elements, then anatomical obstruction due to fibrosis in the bladder neck, that's called bladder neck obstruction, or benign hypertrophy of the prostate, or cancer prostate. All these things give rise to LUTS. So what are the obstructive symptoms? There is hesitancy, worsened if the bladder is very full, poor flow, unimpaired by straining. The straining increases the flow in BPH, whereas it decreases the flow in stricture urethra. Intermittent stream, stops and starts. Dribbling, post-void dribbling is a common thing. You see an elderly man coming out of the toilet, wetting his trousers. This is due to post-void dribbling. Sensation of poor bladder emptying, sensation of fullness, bladder fullness, and episodes of retention of urine, sometimes acute or chronic. Storage, these are storage symptoms, irritative symptoms. Frequency, number of times he goes to the toilet, most so in the night, that is called nocturia. Urgency, he has to pass urine, otherwise he'll be wetting his clothes. Incontinence, if he wets his clothes actually, and nocturnal incontinence or flow incontinence. So what is bladder outlet obstruction? It is a urodynamic concept with non-specific symptoms because all other things produce the bladder outlet obstruction. Low flow rates and high voiding pressures. Diagnosed definitively only by pressure flow studies. Urodynamically proven obstruction can result because of BPH, bladder neck obstruction, bladder neck hypertrophy, cancer prostate, erectile stricture, or a functional obstruction due to neurological conditions. So what are the effects of bladder outlet obstruction on the bladder? As we have sending hypertrophy of the bladder musculature is there. Urinary flow rates decrease. There should be amount minimum of 200 ml in the bladder to do this test. And peak flow rate of 15 ml per second is normal. Less than that is low. And voiding pressure. Pressure more than 80 centimeters of water is high. This occurs when there is outflow obstruction and bladder tries to compensate for that. Less than 60 centimeters of water is normal. More than 80 is high. What are the complications? Acute retention of urine, chronic retention of urine, residual volume is more than 250 ml, impaired bladder emptying, hematuria, pain, exclude acute retention, urinary infection, stone, prostate cancer, or carcinoma of the bladder if there is pain. So what does chronic retention do? Chronic retention increases residual volume, which increases tension in the bladder. That leads to hydronephrosis both sides, renal impairment, and overflow incontinence, enuresis, and renal impairment. These are the produced due to retention of urine in the bladder. So impaired bladder emptying, retention, and caliculi. These are the complications. So here we will stop with the BPH. We'll discuss in more about next time, but still there is time. We'll finish about the assessment of the patient. You have diagnosed a patient with BPH by virtue of symptoms, irritative symptoms and voiding symptoms, confirmed by an ultrasound examination, wherein you find the prostate enlarged and residual is there, and there is hypertrophy of the bladder by means of thickness in the bladder wall, which is given by an ultrasound. Then you do a transrectal ultrasound to rule out malignancy, find out only BPH. You have to decide what to do with the patient. So you have to assess the patient for these things. History, as I said, obstructive symptoms or voiding symptoms, irritative symptoms, which are more. Surgery for obstructive symptoms is more useful than irritative symptoms because the irritative symptoms may not come down. So the patient is voiding frequently, but residual is less than 50 ml. There is no use in doing surgery. Of course, other conditions are there. Abdominal examination to feel for the bladder. Bladder is palpable in chronic retention, painless, smooth enlargement. It is usually presents like that. Patient is not aware. It may be swelling of urine because of dribbling, incontinence. Rectal examination to make diagnosis of BPH and rule out carcinoma of the prostate. Serum PSA, if there are nodules, you do serum PSA to rule out cancer prostate. Flow rate measurements, urinary flow rate by means of uroflowmetry. Usually, that's not a part of assessment in our parts, but to produce papers, you require all the quantification. You do a flow rate measurement. Pressure flow urodynamic studies only when you suspect some neurogenic element in the outflow tract symptoms. Blood test, one to diagnose any renal insufficiency produced by this or fitness for surgery. Then routine examination of the urine to know if there is urinary infection or not. Upper tract imaging by means of an ultrasound. And if there are anything found in ultrasound, other tests. Cystourethropy is an important thing for diagnosis of benign hypertrophy prostate or carcinoma prostate. And then study the interior of the bladder, whether there are changes of carcinoma in situ or bladder malignancies. And transrectal ultrasound to delineate the various zones of the prostate. Coming to history, you take the history, frequency, urgency, urge incontinence, hesitancy, sensation of incomplete voiding, narrowing of stream, all these things are important. You need to ask them. They're all symptoms of irritative symptoms. Constipation, you have to remember constipation as a cause of retention of urine in the elderly. Most of the 80-year-old people who don't eat much, don't drink water, they can have severe constipation, and this constipation may be the cause of urinary retention. Bedwetting or post-void dribbling suggests some overflow incontinence because of the chronic retention. Hematuria is one symptom which can produce due to veins, engorged veins of the prostate. Burning micturition suggests of urinary tract infection. And comorbid pathology like hypertension, diabetes, you have to ask. This is one of the important scores which is taken into consideration while logging the BPH. International prostate symptom score, IPSS it is called. This is only quantification of symptoms, how you grade them based on these things. Is it that? There are incomplete emptying, frequency, intermittency, urgency, weak straining, and nocturia. You given grades, and also quality of life is also important. Quality of life due to the urinary symptoms is also assessed with this International Prostate Symptom Score, and this is as a guide for the treatment of the prostate symptoms. Rectal examination, as I said, in benign hypertrophy, posterior surface, that's what you feel. Smooth, convex, and typically elastic. Median groove is felt normally. Sphincter tone is normal. Rectal mucosa can be made to move over the prostate. This is, as I described in carcinoma prostate, it is a normal rectal examination. Residual urine may be felt as a fluctuating swelling. It's a rare thing, but you have to assess the prostate only after bladder is emptied. If there is retention, you'll have to put a catheter, empty the bladder, and then only assess the prostate. Otherwise, you'll not be able to assess the prostate normally. You have to rule out neurological basis of retention of urine, excluding diabetes, neurological condition, disseminated sclerosis, because urinary system has dual control. One is a spinal center, the other one is a cortical center. So all these things, these both damage the urinary process and cause symptoms such as outflow obstruction. So we'll have to rule out other neurological status that mimic prostatic obstruction. As I said, the perianal sensation and cremasteric reflex are important to rule out sacral lesion, S2 to S4 lesions, cardiac coronal lesion, as a reason for these symptoms. Then serum PSA. Routine serum PSA is done only for more than 70 years with a family history of carcinoma prostate. As I said, carcinoma prostate has significant family history, it is more common. And abnormal rectal examination. Routine serum PSA is not done now because more so in the young age group, and normal rectal examination. So I think we'll stop at this because we have got more time. We'll continue this next time along with some other topic. And now, if you have any questions, I'll be ready to answer. Right? If you have any questions, you can ask them, ask me. So today, we have started with cancer prostate and came back to benign hypertrophy because we are continuing the stream of malignancies. We have done carcinoma prostate, and the symptomology of carcinoma prostate and BPH may be very similar in the early stage of disease. But you have to keep in mind the possibility of carcinoma prostate. Unless you keep it in mind, you will not be diagnosing, and you have to suspect it. And you'll also know that there are other reasons for retention of urine other than benign hypertrophy prostate or carcinoma prostate, like neurological things and higher center problems. There's one question, I think. Ask others also to join the Dean's class. Okay. Why does BPH does not turn into malignancy? Because it is not a benign lesion turning into malignancy. Usually benign lesion to start with, as I said, in carcinoma prostate, bladder, renal cell carcinoma also, an adenoma doesn't turn into malignancy. To start with, it is a malignancy. Benign hypertrophy, by name itself suggests it's a benign hypertrophy prostate. The reasons for carcinoma prostate do not apply for the benign hypertrophy prostate. And it doesn't turn into malignancy by whatever means. It remains benign hypertrophy. But the foci of malignancy will start in the posterior zone, which are not removed in BPH. So you may think that BPH is turning into malignancy afterwards, but it's not like that. That posterior zone, which is the seat of malignancy, might have contained certain cells which are malignant, and they become manifest after the surgery. But BPH doesn't become. usually we get carcinoma prostate patients very in an advanced stage, wherein the hard nodular prostate, not mobile, fixed, and not amenable for any radical cystectomy, a radical prostatectomy, things like that. So what we do usually is, when they come for retention of urine, we put a catheter, give them the anti-androgens, bicalutamide or stilbestol, whatever we used to give that, and then give it for 2 weeks, remove the catheter and see if they can pass urine or not. If they cannot pass urine, put back the catheter and do an archidectomy after establishing and wait for 2 more weeks. If it subsides and they pass urine, you don't need to do anything or observe the patient, that's all. But if the cancer grows like that, causes obstruction, you will do a transrectal prostate to give relief to the patient. So our main treatment is androgen ablation by archidectomy and complete androgen blockade by giving drugs like bicalutamide, which also affect the other androgens secreted elsewhere in the body other than testosterone. So usually that's what we do. But now with the advent of PSA in the West, they're diagnosing more and more of cancer prostates by their PSA and transrectal ultrasound and biopsy, guided biopsies. They're diagnosing more and more cancers and they are treating by radical prostatectomy. So radical prostatectomy by open operation, laparoscopy or robotic surgery have increased. And what you do after removal of the prostate, you anastomose the rest of the bladder to the urethra, urethrovesical anastomosis, which you do and then manage. That's the current line management. Early diagnosis, radical prostatectomy in a patient whose life expectancy is more and whose performance level is more. If they're elderly, confined to bed, not doing anything, you don't do anything, just conservative management. And just like that, you diagnose cancer after TRP, you don't do anything, active surveillance for the patients, and then follow the patient and do when it is required, right? By then, we'll meet next time. We'll continue the benign hypertrophy where we have stopped, and then continue some other topic, right? Take care, be well, right?